At 11:47 p.m., the wind outside Rosie's diner screamed like it had a personal grudge. Inside, a broke waitress named Clara Miller counted her last $18 in tips under the flicker of a dying neon sign. She thought she was alone until the pounding started. 10 huge men stood outside, soaked to the bone, begging for shelter. She didn't know it yet, but those weren't just strangers. They were professional wrestlers, and they were about to change her life forever. Let me know in the comments, and also tell me which city and country you're watching from, so I can thank you personally. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true stories like this. The rain that night didn't fall. It attacked. It slammed against the diner windows like handfuls of gravel, rattling the loose panes and whistling through the gaps in the doorframe. The empty parking lot reflected the neon sign. Rosie's Diner, though the R had long since burned out, leaving it to read Ozie's in a faint, trembling pink glow. Inside, Clara Miller hunched behind the counter, her blonde hair pulled into a bun that hadn't been tidy since sunset. She was 28, but felt twice that the diner clock ticked past midnight, and the only sounds were the faint hum of the coffee pot and the wind's lonely howl. She stacked a few dollar bills into neat piles and sighed. $18, she muttered. 4 hours of smiling for $18. Her apron smelled like grease, her shoes squelched with each step, and her fingers ached from scrubbing tables. Still, she wiped the counter again, because that's what you did when you had nothing left to control. Rosie's was supposed to be temporary, a quick job after her car died and her college plans went down with it. That was 2 years ago. Now she was stuck in this tiny Ohio town, serving stale coffee to truckers and insomniacs. And tonight? Not even the truckers had stopped by a flash of lightning split the sky, throwing white light across the diner. For one split second, the world outside looked like a photograph. The road slick and empty, the highway sign bending in the wind. Then the thunder came, a deep growl that made the metal napkin holders tremble. Clara jumped. Her nerves were already frayed. She poured herself the last of the coffee and took a bitter sip. "Burnt," she muttered. "Just like my luck." She turned to grab her jacket when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Bang. 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 3 heavy knocks against the glass door. Her heart stopped. She froze, cup midair, eyes darting towards the entrance. Outside, the storm distorted everything. Rain streaks, reflections, shadows. For a second she thought maybe it was a tree branch, but then bang, bang, bang. Louder. Closer. Real. She peered through the window. Through the sheets of rain, she saw shapes, huge, broad-shouldered silhouettes, 10 of them. They looked like statues carved from shadow and thunder. One of them moved toward the light, and Clara's breath hitched. He was enormous, his soaked hoodie clinging to muscles that could have been sculpted. Her first instinct screamed, "Lock the door, call the cops, don't move." No one sane opened their door to 10 men past midnight in the middle of nowhere, but then she saw one of them stumble. Another reached to steady him. They weren't shouting. They weren't pounding in anger. They were knocking. Desperately. The sound wasn't aggression. It was pleading. She hesitated. The smart thing would be to pretend she hadn't heard. Go back to wiping the counter. Keep the lights low, but Clara had spent too much of her life being ignored, standing outside in the cold, hoping someone would open the door for her. So she took a breath that shook all the way down to her ribs. Her hand found the deadbolt. Click. The noise was deafening in the silence. The wind tore the door open with a crash, and the rain came pouring in. 10 men stood there, soaked to the skin, steam rising off their bodies in the cold air. Their faces were pale, lips blue. They looked exhausted, not dangerous. The man in front, tall and solid as a wall, raised a hand. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough from the cold. "We don't want trouble. Just need a warm place to wait out the storm. We can pay." For a long moment, Clara just stared. Then she shook her head, half in disbelief, half in resolve. "Get in before you freeze," she said. "Coffee's on the house. I'm not charging for basic human decency." The biggest man, the one with the square jaw and kind eyes, blinked, surprised. Then he smiled. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "We appreciate that." As the wrestlers stepped inside, the diner that had felt like a tomb moments ago suddenly filled with life, warmth, and dripping boots. Clara shut the door against the storm, not realizing that she'd just opened another one entirely. The diner door clicked shut behind the men, muting the storm to a distant roar. For a moment, the sound of dripping water filled the air, boots squeaking, rainwater pooling onto the black and white tile floor. The biggest man, the one who'd spoken, removed his hoodie. His t-shirt underneath read Ohio Wrestling Federation. The bold red letters stretched across his chest like armor. He was huge, but his voice when he spoke was careful, almost gentle. "Name's Jack Rourke," he said, extending a rough, calloused hand. "Most people call me Titan." Clara blinked. Titan. The name clicked. Even she had heard of him, the kind of guy who could lift another man over his head like a bag of flour. "Wait," she said, eyes darting from him to the others. "You're wrestlers?" "Professional ones, ma'am," one of them answered with a sheepish grin. He looked younger, early 20s, hair dripping onto the counter. "We were headed to a charity show in Pittsburgh. Bus broke down an hour back. Tow truck said no one's coming till morning." Jack rubbed his hands together, trying to bring life back into his fingers. "Every motel turned us away. Guess 10 big guys look like trouble after dark." Clara gave a small, tired laugh. "Can't imagine why," she said, glancing at the puddle forming by the door. Jack's eyes softened. "We'll pay for whatever you got left. Food, coffee, even just a dry spot." "Food I can do," Clara said, stepping around the counter. "Dry spot. Not so much." The wrestlers chuckled, the sound low and warm. It made the diner feel alive again. Clara grabbed the old coffee pot, the one that gurgled louder than it poured, and started filling mugs, the smell of roasted beans cut through the damp air. "Coffee's free tonight," she said without looking up. "If I charged you, I'd have to charge the storm, too." "Appreciate it," Jack said, wrapping both hands around the steaming mug like it was gold as they settled into the booths, their massive frames crowding the tiny vinyl seats. Clara moved between them with the automatic rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 nights before. But tonight felt different. For the first time in months, the silence didn't hurt. She flipped the closed sign to face outward. The world could wait. "Y'all really wrestlers?" she asked, curious despite herself. The young one, the one who'd smiled first, nodded. "Yeah, we're on a charity circuit. We visit children's hospitals, put on free shows. It's kinda our thing." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Big scary guys breaking tables for charity?" He grinned. "Exactly." That earned a genuine laugh out of her, the first in weeks. It startled her, how light it felt. Jack leaned forward, elbows on the table. "What about you, Clara? You own this place?" "Own it? God, no," she said, pouring another round of coffee. "I just work here. Mr. Patterson owns it. He's home by 9. I pull the late shifts." Jack studied her face quietly. There was something behind her voice, exhaustion that went deeper than sleep could fix. "You got family around here?" She shook her head, setting the pot back on the warmer. "Had. Moved away. It's just me now." The storm cracked outside, thunder shaking the glass. For a moment, everyone went quiet. The diner lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Clara sighed. "Figures. Power's next. You got a generator? Jack asked. Ha! I'm lucky I've got a working toaster. Jack smiled faintly. You know, most folks would have left us out there. We probably looked like we were here to rob the place. Clara shrugged. Maybe. But I've been cold before. Hungry too. It's hard to turn someone away when you know what that feels like. That landed heavy. The wrestlers nodded, silently. In the kitchen, Clara worked fast. Eggs, bacon, toast. The smell filled the diner, mixing with rain and steam and the faint metallic tang of wet pavement. She served plate after plate, hands steady now. When she finally sat down for a moment, wiping her forehead with the back of her arm, she realized they were all watching her, not staring, just looking, with the kind of respect that made her throat tighten. Thank you, Jack said softly, for the food and for opening the door. Clara looked away, embarrassed. It's nothing. It's not nothing, the younger one said. We've been on the road 2 days straight. Everyone else treated us like dirt. You didn't. She gave a faint smile. Guess I'm too tired to judge people anymore. Jack chuckled. Well, don't worry. We're not here to start trouble. Just to eat, warm up, and move on? Good, she said, finishing her coffee. Because if you break one of my booths, I'm charging extra. The wrestlers laughed. Loud, full-bodied, real laughter that filled the space like music. For the first time in years, Rosie's diner didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like home. Outside, the storm howled and hammered the windows. Inside, 10 wrestlers and 1 exhausted waitress sat together under buzzing lights, unaware that a single act of kindness had just rewritten all their lives. By the time the clock above the counter hit 2:15 a.m., the worst of the storm had passed. The pounding on the roof softened to a steady whisper, and the highway outside lay drowned and glistening under the amber glow of the streetlights. Inside Rosie's diner, the air had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was alive. The hiss of the grill mixed with the hum of tired laughter and the clink of mugs. 10 wrestlers who, hours ago, looked like walking shadows were now thawed out, joking, eating, and breathing again. Clara moved between tables like she'd been doing this all her life, refilling cups, scraping plates, handing out napkins. She didn't even notice how tired she was. For once, it didn't matter. Another plate of pancakes? She asked, already flipping the next batch. Jack, Titan, raised his hand sheepishly. Can't let the rookies eat all the carbs. Got a rep to maintain. You already ate 6, one of his teammates teased. Protein, Jack said with a grin. They got eggs in 'em. The group laughed, the sound so genuine that Clara couldn't help but smile too. She'd served hundreds of customers over the years, travelers, couples, loners, but no one had ever filled the place with this kind of energy. When she brought over a new pot of coffee, the youngest wrestler, a freckled kid barely old enough to rent a car, spoke up softly. Ma'am, what's your name? Clara, she said, pouring him a refill. He smiled. Thank you, Clara, for letting us in. Seriously. She waved it off, embarrassed. Don't thank me, thank the storm. Without it, I'd be home in bed. Jack looked up from his plate. Nah, Storm didn't open that door. You did. Clara froze for a moment, not sure what to say. Compliments weren't something she got often. She just gave a small nod, pretending to wipe the counter. They stayed until almost 4 a.m., long after the coffee had gone stale and the food had run out. When they finally stood to leave, the room suddenly felt too quiet, too big. Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He placed a few folded bills under his empty mug, for the food and the kindness. You already paid for the food, she said, frowning. Then call it a tip. When they filed out into the parking lot, the puddles reflecting the faint pink neon. Clara waved, half expecting them to vanish into the mist like some strange dream. Jack lingered by the door. "You work here every night?" "Most nights," she said. "Keeps the lights on." He nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out a black card from his jacket. Heavy cardstock, embossed with a silver logo of a raised fist surrounded by lightning bolts. "If you ever need anything," he said, "you call that number, day or night, no questions asked." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What kind of anything are we talking about?" "The kind that keeps people safe," he said simply, and walked out into the night. The roar of their van engines faded down the wet highway, until all that was left was the hiss of tires and the hum of the diner's old fridge. Clara stood at the door, that card in her hand, rain still dripping from the awning. She looked down at the tip they'd left, a stack of 20s, folded neatly under the mug. She counted quickly. $80, more than her last week's wages. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She did both. By the time she finally made it home to her tiny studio apartment at 5 a.m., the sky was a pale gray. She tossed her apron on the chair, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed on the couch, still in her uniform. Her phone buzzed once, a notification, but she ignored it. Probably spam. She was asleep in minutes. When she woke up, the world had changed. Her phone was buzzing non-stop, vibrating against the table like a living thing. Groaning, she reached for it, eyes squinting at the brightness. "You've been tagged in 87 posts. Friend requests, 240 new. Our Clara Miller trending on Twitter." "What the hell?" she mumbled. She opened the first notification, a Facebook post from someone named Danny Cage, profile picture of a familiar freckled face. It was a photo from last night. Clara, standing at the diner doorway, hair messy, apron stained, a tired but kind smile on her face as she poured coffee into one of their mugs. The caption read, "Last night, 10 of us were stranded in the storm. Every place turned us away. Motels, truck stops, even gas stations. Then we knocked on the door of Rosie's Diner. This woman, Clara, opened up, fed us, and treated us like humans when everyone else saw us as trouble. Remember her face. Remember her kindness." The post had over 6,000 shares. Her hand trembled as she scrolled. Dozens of wrestling pages had reposted it. Sports blogs, local news accounts, even a few blue-check profiles. Comments flooded in. "Heading to Rosie's next week. Someone tell Clara we love her." "Real hero right there. Not all heroes wear capes, some wear aprons." "This story just restored my faith in humanity." Clara's heart pounded. She wasn't used to attention. Not like this. Then her phone rang. It was Jennifer, the morning shift waitress. "Clara, where are you?" Jennifer's voice was shrill with excitement. "You need to get down here now." "What? Why? Did something happen?" "You could say that. There are people everywhere, reporters, fans, wrestlers, and they all keep asking for you." Clara blinked, still in yesterday's clothes, trying to process it. "For me?" "Yes, you. Get your butt down here before I lose my mind." The line went dead. Clara stared at the phone, then at the black card still sitting on her coffee table. The one that said, Jack Titan Rourke, Brotherhood Wrestling Federation. She didn't know it yet, but that card, that post, and that one night of kindness were about to collide and explode in ways she could never imagine. The drive back to Rosie's Diner felt like a dream Clara wasn't ready to wake up from. It was barely 9:30 a.m., the gray clouds still low and heavy, but as she turned onto Route 22, her foot slipped off the gas pedal. The diner's parking lot, usually home to 2 trucks and maybe a lonely sedan, was packed. Not just full, overflowing. Pickup trucks, SUVs, and even a news van crowded the narrow lot. People stood in line outside, umbrellas in hand, snapping photos of the pink neon sign. The same sign that had flickered and died the night before was now glowing bright and steady, as if it too had been revived by the story spreading through the country. Clara's heart thudded as she pulled into a muddy spot on the far edge of the lot. Her old Honda shuddered as she turned the key off. "What on earth?" she whispered, gripping the steering wheel. When she stepped out, the air buzzed with conversation and camera flashes. A little boy in a hoodie tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, is that her, the waitress?" Clara froze. Someone pointed. "That's her. That's Clara." Within seconds, people were smiling, waving, even cheering. A man in a leather jacket shouted, "You're famous now, sweetheart." She wanted to laugh, to tell them they must be mistaken, that she was just tired and underpaid. But it was too late. The moment she reached the diner door, she saw them. Standing by the entrance, coffee cups in hand, were the same wrestlers from last night, all 10 of them. But now they weren't drenched or exhausted or desperate. They looked alive, proud. Jack Rourke, Titan, spotted her immediately. His grin was pure sunshine. "There she is," he called, his booming voice cutting through the noise. Heads turned. A ripple of applause spread across the crowd. Clara wanted to vanish. "Oh my God," she muttered under her breath. Jack strode over, his massive frame blocking the morning light. "You didn't answer your phone," he said, smiling. "Figured we'd better come check on our good luck charm." "Good luck?" she said, blinking. He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed her the screen. Thousands of notifications, likes, tags. "We broke 500,000 views overnight. You're trending everywhere, Clara. The waitress who let us in." She stared at the screen. That can't be real." "Oh, it's real," said another wrestler, sipping his coffee. "Your face is all over ESPN, Reddit, even a local news channel. Someone started a GoFundMe to buy Clara a new coffee maker. It's at 15 grand already." Clara's jaw dropped. 15? What? Jack chuckled. "Told you kindness comes back around." Before she could respond, the diner door flew open. Jennifer, her co-worker, stumbled out, hair frizzy, face flushed from chaos. "Clara," she yelled. "Thank God! I'm losing my mind in there." "What's going on?" Jennifer pointed inside. "See for yourself." Clara stepped through the door and stopped dead. The diner looked unrecognizable. Every booth, every stool, every square foot of space was filled. Reporters with microphones jostled for position near the counter. Locals stood shoulder to shoulder with wrestling fans wearing Titan t-shirts. The sound was deafening. Laughter, plates clinking, camera shutters clicking non-stop. Ray, the cook, was behind the grill like a man possessed, flipping pancakes like a machine. "Clara!" he shouted over the noise. "You better be ready, because we just broke a record. We sold out of bacon in an hour." Clara blinked, half in shock, half in awe. I don't even know how to process this." Jennifer pressed a slip of paper into her hand. "You might want to start with this." It was a note scribbled in bold handwriting. "Clara, call the landlord immediately. Urgent. Mr. Patterson." Her stomach dropped. "Oh no," she whispered. Jack noticed her expression. "Something wrong?" "Probably just the landlord being greedy," she said quietly, tucking the note into her apron. Jack frowned. "If it's about money, call me first." "Why?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Because," he said simply, "the Brotherhood doesn't forget its own." For the next few hours, Clara worked like she was running a marathon. She served strangers who thanked her by name. She smiled for reporters she didn't know. The tip jar overflowed with 20s and 50s, and someone even handed her a signed wrestling belt for luck. But beneath the laughter and chaos, a shadow crept in, the kind that always follows light too bright to last. By 3 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the lot. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, umbrella in hand, and surveyed the packed diner with calculating eyes. Clara didn't see him. Not yet. She was too busy pouring coffee for two wide-eyed college kids, still trying to wrap her head around the whirlwind her life had become. But the man at the door, Mr. Carl Patterson's landlord, Robert Curley, had already made up his mind. He smiled, thin and cold. "Looks like this place just got more valuable," he murmured. That night, after the crowd finally thinned and the wrestlers helped stack the chairs, Clara sat by the window, staring at the glowing pink sign. It was the first time in her life she'd felt like she belonged somewhere, like her kindness had actually meant something. But out there, in the dark, beyond the neon light, the kind of people who saw compassion as currency were already circling. And soon, Clara would find out that when you go viral for doing good, not everyone who shows up at your door is there to say thank you. By the time the sun sank behind the Ohio cornfields, the diner was finally quiet again. The booths were empty, the fryers silent, the coffee pot cleaned and unplugged. The only sound left was the faint hum of the neon light buzzing in the window. Rosie's Diner, glowing pink against the dark. Clara sat at the counter, legs aching, her apron still damp from spilled coffee and melted ice. The last 24 hours felt like a blur. Surreal, almost cinematic. She checked her phone. Over 48,000 unread notifications. The GoFundMe had crossed $26,000. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "All this because I opened a door." She smiled faintly, then sighed. Because deep down, she knew things like this didn't last. Not for people like her. That's when the doorbell chimed. Clara glanced up, expecting maybe a fan or a local reporter running late. But instead a man stepped in wearing a sharp gray suit and a colder smile. He was tall, thin, and carried a leather folder under his arm. His hair was slicked back, and his shoes clicked like they were keeping time. "Good evening, Miss Miller," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "You must be the woman of the hour." Clara frowned. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He extended his hand. "Robert Curley. I represent the property owners of this establishment." "Property owners?" she repeated, suspicion tightening her stomach. "That's right. You work here, I assume?" "Yeah. Been here 2 years." He looked around, taking in the counter, the booths, the faint coffee smell still lingering in the air. "Quite the crowd you had today." Clara folded her arms. "We did, yeah. Guess people like pancakes more than I thought." Curly smiled without warmth. "Oh, I'm sure they like you more than the pancakes." He set the leather folder on the counter and opened it with a neat flick. "Mr. Patterson, your employer, leases this diner from my client. And under the terms of that lease, the property's value, and therefore its rent, is subject to change under certain conditions." She blinked. "Rent can change because people showed up?" He nodded, too easily. "You've become quite the celebrity, Miss Miller. With all this attention, we believe the diner's market value has increased significantly, which means the rent will too, starting next month." Clara stared at him, her throat tightening. "Increased how much?" He turned a page, feigning a sympathetic tone. "From $2,400 a month to, let's see, $6,000. She stood so fast the stool screeched. "That's triple!" He didn't flinch. "It's business, nothing personal." "Business," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You think because people like a good story you can just bleed us dry?" Curly sighed, closing the folder. "I understand your frustration, But that's the price of success. People want to come here now. Reporters, tourists, influencers. It's free advertising for the landlord. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and slid it across the counter. I represent a buyer interested in acquiring this property outright. A local investor. You might have heard of him. Derek Hutchins. Clara frowned. Never heard the name. He's a sports entertainment investor, Curly continued smoothly. He wants to transform this place into something fresh, maybe the wrestler's table. Themed around your viral story, he's prepared to offer a very generous price. Clara's hands clenched. You're joking. Curly smiled. You'd still have a job, of course, as a hostess. You'd be the face of the brand. You might even make more money. She stared at him. This diner isn't for sale. He tilted his head. You might want to talk to your boss before you make that call. I will, she said firmly, stepping closer. And I'll tell him to find a new landlord while he's at it. Curly chuckled softly, unfazed. That's not how leases work, Miss Miller. But I admire your spirit. He picked up his folder, adjusted his cuffs, and headed for the door. Enjoy the fame while it lasts. It tends to fade faster than rent increases. The door closed behind him with a faint chime, leaving Clara standing alone under the buzz of the neon light. Her pulse pounded in her ears. $6,000 a month? They couldn't afford that in 3 months, let alone 1. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the black business card Jack Rourke had given her. The silver logo caught the light, a raised fist surrounded by lightning. On the back, one simple phrase was printed, "The Brotherhood looks after its own." Clara stared at it for a long moment. Her pride told her to ignore it, to fix this herself. But another voice, smaller, quieter, whispered, "Maybe you don't have to do this alone this time." The next morning, she called the number. The line rang twice before a deep voice answered, low and steady. "This is Titan." Clara exhaled. "Jack, it's me, Clara." A pause, then warmth in his tone. "Hey, sunshine, you okay?" She hesitated. "Not exactly, we've got a problem." By sunset, 10 motorcycles and 2 black vans pulled into the lot of Rosie's Diner. Every head turned as the same men from that stormy night stepped out, wearing Brotherhood wrestling jackets, boots, and serious faces. Jack walked straight up to her, eyes calm but focused. "You said we've got a problem," he said. "Let's fix it." The next morning, the sky over Route 22 was washed pale blue, the storm clouds long gone. But the tension inside Rosie's Diner was heavier than thunder ever could be. Clara stood by the window, wiping down the counter for the 10th time, even though it was already spotless. Every few seconds, she glanced at the parking lot, where Jack, Titan Rourke, and his crew waited, leaning against their black vans like a living wall of muscle and conviction. "Are you sure about this?" asked Ray, the cook, nervously peering through the blinds. "No," Clara admitted, "but I'm done being scared." At exactly 9 a.m., a black Cadillac pulled into the lot. It didn't rumble like the Brotherhood's vehicles. It purred, smooth and expensive. The door opened, and a man in his mid-40s stepped out, wearing a custom suit, polished shoes, and the kind of smirk that came with a trust fund, Derek Hutchins. Sports investor. Corporate shark. And, according to the rumor mill, the kind of man who bought dreams just to flip them for profit. He adjusted his tie, glanced at the wrestlers, unimpressed, and walked inside like he owned the air around him. "Miss Miller," he said, extending a manicured hand. "What a pleasure." Clara didn't take it. "You're Derek Hutchins?" "Guilty," he said with a grin. "And you must be the famous waitress who broke the internet." She crossed her arms. "I just did what anyone would do." "Oh no," he said, sitting casually at the counter. "You did something extraordinary. You showed compassion, authenticity, heart, That's rare these days, and valuable. Jack stepped forward from the doorway, his massive frame filling it like a wall. You might want to get to your point, Hutchins. Hutchins' eyes flicked toward him. Ah, the Brotherhood. I was wondering when the cavalry would show up. You boys sure know how to make an entrance? Jack didn't move. We don't like people who threaten our friends. Hutchins smirked. Threaten? Please, I'm here to make an offer. A generous one. He opened his tablet, spinning it toward Clara. On the screen was a mock-up design. The wrestler's table, home of the viral Waitress. Her face was front and center, smiling, surrounded by neon lights and a wrestling ring motif. Clara's stomach turned. You've got to be kidding. Not at all, Hutchins said smoothly. We'll remodel, expand, and franchise. You'll be the official spokesperson, a national brand built on your story. You'll be famous, Clara. Really famous, the kind of famous that pays. Jack folded his arms. And what happens to Rosie's? Hutchins gave a careless shrug. It becomes part of something bigger. New management, new ownership, progress. Clara felt her jaw tighten. You mean it stops being ours? Hutchins smiled thinly. You make it sound sentimental. Look, I'm offering opportunity. You can stay a waitress in a dying diner, or you can become the face of a multi-million-dollar company. Your choice. Jack stepped closer, voice low and steady. You don't get to buy kindness like a product, Derek. Hutchins chuckled. Oh, Jack, still preaching that old-school loyalty crap? The world runs on money, not morals. You know that better than anyone. I've seen your old contracts. For a split second, Jack's expression hardened, but he didn't rise to the bait. You're right, he said quietly. I do know how money changes people. That's why I walked away from it. Hutchins stood, straightening his jacket. Fine, be noble. But when the rent triples, nobility won't pay the bills. The landlord already signed off. This place is done in 30 days. Clara's voice cracked. You can't do that. Oh, I can, he said with a smirk. You'll see the papers by the end of the week. He turned toward the door, but Jack's deep voice stopped him cold. You know, Jack said, his tone calm but dangerous. Funny thing about stories. They don't belong to corporations. They belong to people. Hutchins paused. That a threat? Jack took a step closer, his shadow falling over the man like a mountain. No, it's a promise. For a heartbeat, the air felt electric. Hutchins's confident smirk faltered, just slightly, before he turned on his heel and walked out to his Cadillac. The door shut behind him, and the silence that followed was louder than any storm. Clara dropped onto a stool, covering her face with both hands. He's going to take this place, Jack. I can't stop him. Jack knelt beside her, his voice gentle but steady. You don't have to stop him alone. She looked up, eyes wet. You really think you can take on a corporate investor? He smiled faintly. We've taken on tougher. She almost laughed. Like who? Each other, said one of the wrestlers from behind him. The others chuckled softly, easing the tension just enough for Clara to breathe again. Jack stood and turned to his crew. Boys, looks like we've got a fight coming. And this time, he said, glancing back at Clara, we're fighting for something worth it. That night, under the glow of the diner's pink neon sign, the Brotherhood gathered around the counter, laying out a plan. They'd seen men like Hutchins before, men who built empires on the backs of small-town hearts. But this time, the underdogs weren't backing down. And when word got out that the viral waitress who helped 10 wrestlers was about to lose her diner, the internet wouldn't stay quiet for long. For the next 2 days, Rosie's diner didn't sleep. Word spread faster than grease on a hot griddle. By Tuesday morning, the story had shifted from kind waitress helps stranded wrestlers to corporate investor threatens to seize viral diner. Social media exploded. Stand with Clara was trending across every platform. Thousands of wrestling fans, locals, and even celebrities shared her story, tagging Hutchins' company with angry comments. Some wrote poems, others sent donations. A few even vowed to drive cross-country just to eat one plate of Rosie's pancakes before the place got shut down. Clara couldn't believe it. Every time she refreshed her phone, new messages poured in. "Stay strong, Clara. We got your back." They can't buy kindness. Jack Rourke is a hero. The diner had become a movement, but Clara wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She sat in her usual booth near the window, her fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. She looked exhausted, a kind of tired that went deeper than sleep. Jack slid into the booth across from her, wearing his Brotherhood jacket. His eyes were steady, but the dark circles under them said he hadn't rested either. "You look like you haven't blinked in 12 hours, he said quietly. "I haven't," she admitted. "I keep thinking it's all going to fall apart any second. That guy Hutchins, he's rich, connected. He'll just crush us." Jack leaned forward. "Then we make it harder to crush us." She looked up. "How?" He grinned faintly. "By getting louder than him." That afternoon, the Brotherhood Wrestling Federation arrived in full force. Not just the 10 men from that night. Hundreds of wrestlers from across the Midwest. Their trucks and bikes lined the highway, forming a wall of solidarity. Camera crews showed up. Drones hovered overhead. Reporters from ESPN, USA Today, and the Columbus Chronicle filled the lot, capturing the surreal sight. A group of wrestlers, men known for chaos, fights, and spectacle, standing shoulder to shoulder in silence around a diner to protect a waitress. Jack stepped up to the microphone that one of the reporters shoved toward him. "We're not here for a show," he said, his deep voice cutting through the wind. "We're here because kindness deserves protection. This woman opened her door when she had nothing. Now we're opening ours for her." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, camera flashes. Clara stood behind the counter, watching from the window, tears pricking her eyes. She'd never seen anything like it. An army of men who could crush concrete walls standing in complete peace, guarding her tiny world. Inside, the diner buzzed with people, volunteers wiping tables, locals cooking pancakes for free, fans bringing flowers and signs. Someone taped a poster to the door. "This is more than a diner, it's proof that good still exists." Jennifer, the morning waitress, rushed up to Clara, holding her phone. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly. On the screen, a live video showed Hutchins's office building in downtown Columbus, surrounded by protesters holding #StandWithClara signs. Clara stared. "Oh my God." Jack walked in, dusting rain off his jacket. "The tide's turning," he said with a proud smile. "You're not just a waitress anymore, Clara. You're a symbol." She frowned. "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to help some people." He nodded. "And that's exactly why people trust you, because you didn't want anything in return." Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. From Derek Hutchins. "Tell your muscle friends to clear the lot. You're making things worse for yourself." Clara read it aloud. Jack's jaw flexed. "He's getting nervous." "Good," said Ray, flipping a burger on the grill. "Means we're doing something right." By evening, the diner had turned into a beacon. Lanterns hung from the porch. Wrestling fans cooked hot dogs outside, and news anchors reported live from the parking lot. Someone started playing country music from a speaker, and soon laughter and voices filled the cold air. Despite everything, it felt like home again. Jack stood next to Clara by the counter, watching the crowd. "You see that?" he said softly. "That's not chaos out there. That's community." Clara nodded, swallowing hard. It's beautiful, but it's also terrifying. What if Hutchins doesn't back off? Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he'll find out what happens when you corner people who've got nothing left to lose, and everything worth fighting for. Late that night, after the crowd began to fade and the reporters packed up their vans, a black car rolled slowly past the lot. Clara noticed it first. Its tinted windows reflected the diner lights, but inside she caught a faint silhouette, the glint of a wristwatch, a white shirt collar, a smirk she'd recognize anywhere. Derek Hutchins. He didn't stop. He just watched for a moment, then drove away into the dark. Clara shivered. "He's not done," she whispered. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Neither are we." Outside, the Rosie's Diner sign flickered brighter, as if refusing to die out. By Thursday morning, the war had officially begun. Clara woke up to a stack of legal notices taped to the diner's door, each one stamped with bold red letters. Notice of violation. Trespassing warning, unauthorized commercial activity, and the name at the bottom of every page, Derek Hutchins. Her heart sank. She tore one of the papers free, crumpling it in her hands. "He's really doing this," she whispered. Jack was already there, standing by the counter with his arms crossed, his eyes unreadable. "He's trying to scare you," he said. "It's intimidation, not law." "He's got lawyers, Jack. Real ones." Jack looked up slowly. "So do we." He nodded toward the door, where a woman in a dark blazer walked in. Her steps were confident, heels clicking against the tile. She extended her hand to Clara. "Alyssa Morgan. I'm with the Ohio Pro Bono Legal Network. Mr. Rourke reached out to me last night." Clara blinked. "You're a lawyer?" "Technically, 10 of us are," Alyssa said, smiling faintly. "We saw your story online. We're volunteering to handle your case. No charge." Clara turned to Jack, eyes wide. "You did this?" He shrugged, pretending it was nothing. "The wrestling community takes care of its own, and besides..." He smirked. "We're good at fights." By noon, Rosie's Diner had turned into a fortress of paperwork, cameras, and caffeine. Alyssa and her team sat in booth number 4, laptops open, drafting counterclaims and press releases. Outside, the Brotherhood held their ground, a line of men standing tall, arms folded, watching every car that pulled in. The air buzzed with tension. Reporters hovered like vultures, waiting for the next spark. And they didn't have to wait long. A black Escalade screeched into the lot. The door swung open. Out stepped Hutchins, sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky, followed by 2 bulky men in suits. He walked right up to the diner entrance. The Brotherhood shifted, quietly, deliberately, until they formed a wall between him and the door. Jack stepped forward. "Can we help you, Derek?" Hutchins smirked. "Cute. A welcoming committee." "You're trespassing," Jack said evenly. "I'm inspecting my investment," Hutchins replied. "Or what's left of it. This property's about to be condemned. Fire hazard, zoning issues, unsafe crowding, the works." Jack crossed his arms. "You mean fabricated paperwork you filed this morning?" Hutchins chuckled. "I prefer expedited." He peered over Jack's shoulder, spotting Clara through the window. "You really should have taken my deal, sweetheart. You'd be in a studio right now, not a lawsuit." Jack's hand clenched into a fist, but he didn't move. His voice dropped an octave, calm and dangerous. "Watch how you talk to her." Hutchins raised his eyebrows. "You threatening me?" "No," Jack said, eyes locked on him. "I'm warning you." The tension was thick enough to choke on. The 2 men behind Hutchins shifted uneasily. They were big, but not Brotherhood big. Then, a new voice cut through the standoff. "Mr. Hutchins!" Alyssa stepped outside, a folder in hand. "I'm Attorney Morgan. You've served our client with fraudulent eviction notices, and we've already filed an injunction you set 1 foot closer to this property, and I'll personally have you escorted off by the sheriff." Hutchins laughed softly. "Lady, you can't stop progress." Alyssa smiled tightly. "Funny. That's exactly what the last guy who tried this said, right before he lost his company." The reporters' microphones were out now, cameras flashing like lightning. Hutchins's smirk faltered for the first time. He adjusted his cuffs. "This isn't over," he hissed. Jack took a step forward, towering over him. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's just getting started." Hutchins turned on his heel, gesturing for his men to follow. They climbed back into the Escalade and peeled out of the lot, tires screeching. The crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters swarmed Alyssa, shouting questions. Clara just stood frozen, her hands trembling, adrenaline buzzing through her veins. Jack turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded, voice unsteady. "I think so. I just can't believe this is happening." Jack's grin softened. "You stood up to a man who thought he could buy your soul. That's not small, Clara. That's huge." That night, the diner glowed brighter than ever. Fans and locals brought blankets, coffee, even homemade pies. The Brotherhood lit bonfires in the parking lot to keep warm. Someone played an old country song on guitar, and for the first time in days, Clara laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded. She looked around at the faces, rough, kind, loyal, and realized this wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a family. Jack sat beside her on the curb, watching the embers float up into the cold air. "You know," he said quietly, "there's something poetic about this." "What's that?" "A bunch of wrestlers fighting a billionaire over pancakes." Clara giggled, leaning her head on her knees. "I didn't plan for any of this." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but you inspired it." She turned to him. "And you're sure we can win this?" Jack's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "We already are." But as the laughter faded and the fire burned low, Clara didn't see the man parked down the road. Hutchins's private investigator, camera lens aimed straight at her. He clicked a photo, lowered his camera, and made a call. "She's not backing down," he said. "Better hit harder." The line crackled, and Hutchins's cold voice came through. "Then it's time we remind them who owns the ring." By the following week, Rosie's Diner wasn't just a roadside cafe anymore. It had become the beating heart of a nationwide story. Every news outlet had picked it up. Morning shows ran montages of Clara handing out coffee to wrestlers, while social media boiled over with hashtags like #ClaraViesCorporate and #ThePeoplesDiner. But while the internet turned her into an icon, Clara herself was drowning in paperwork, court dates, and exhaustion. Alyssa Morgan, her attorney, turned the diner's back office into a war room. Legal documents were stacked like towers. The Brotherhood wrestlers rotated through day and night shifts, guarding the property, serving coffee, or helping fans take pictures outside. It looked like unity from the outside. But behind the counters, Clara was running on fumes. On Tuesday morning, she stood in the courthouse lobby in downtown Columbus, clutching a folder of receipts and photographs. The sound of reporters shouting questions echoed through the marble hall. "Clara, do you think you'll win? Is it true you're refusing Hutchins' $250,000 offer? Are the wrestlers with you today?" She gave the same tired answer every time. "I just want to keep my job, that's all." But when the courtroom doors opened, and she saw Jack sitting in the front row, massive, calm, reassuring, something inside her steadied. The hearing began. Hutchins sat across the room, all smug smiles and silk ties, flanked by 3 attorneys. His legal team tried to bury Clara's side in technical jargon and zoning codes, but Alyssa was sharper. Every argument they threw, she sliced apart with cool precision. When Hutchins claimed the diner was unsafe, Alyssa presented a fire inspection dated just last month, passed with perfect scores. When he argued Clara had caused public nuisance by drawing crowds, she reminded the judge that Hutchins himself had tried to monetize that same attention, and when he insisted the viral fame had made the property too valuable for its current tenants, she delivered her knockout line. Mr. Hutchins doesn't care about safety, value, or business. He cares about ownership. He wants to buy the soul of a small-town diner because he couldn't build one himself. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Hutchins' jaw tightened. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "Let's proceed with evidence." Alyssa nodded, signaling Clara. Clara's hands shook as she stood and approached the witness stand. The courtroom suddenly felt too big, the air too heavy. But when she looked toward the crowd, saw the wrestlers lined up in the back row like soldiers, her breath slowed. Alyssa gave her a small nod. "Just tell the truth." Clara swallowed. "I didn't open that door for attention," she began softly. "I did it because they were cold and wet, and I know what that feels like. I didn't think anyone would care. But then the world showed up, and suddenly this place wasn't just a diner anymore. It was hope for people who needed to believe that kindness still matters." The courtroom went quiet. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Clara's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "And if that's something worth taking away, then maybe the world's colder than I thought." By the end of the day, Hutchins's team was on the defensive. Their paperwork was a mess of contradictions. Their witnesses fell apart under Alyssa's calm questioning. When the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed the hallway, microphones flashing. Clara didn't speak. She just walked outside with Jack beside her, the weight of the day pressing hard. "You did good," he said quietly. "I don't know," she whispered. "He's still powerful. Money always wins." Jack stopped walking. "You think that's what this is about? Money?" She looked up at him, tears threatening to spill. "Then what is it about?" He smiled, soft, knowing. "It's about what money can't buy. Dignity, loyalty, humanity." She stared at him, then laughed weakly. "You sound like a preacher." He chuckled. "Nah, just a man who's lost enough fights to know which ones matter." That night, when Clara got home, her phone nearly exploded with notifications. A video clip from her courtroom testimony had gone viral. Again, the caption read, "She didn't fight for fame. She fought for decency." Millions of views, thousands of comments. One of them stood out, "Tomorrow we march." Attached was a photo, a sea of people gathering outside Rosie's diner, holding candles and signs that read, "Kindness isn't for sale." Clara covered her mouth in disbelief. "Oh my God." Her phone buzzed again, a text from Jack. "Be ready tomorrow. We've got backup coming." By dawn, she'd find out what he meant, because when she stepped outside the diner the next morning, the road was full. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people stood shoulder to shoulder, families, bikers, wrestlers, teachers, even police officers off duty. All there for one reason: to stand with a waitress who had once opened her door to strangers and, without meaning to, opened a movement that no amount of money could silence. By sunrise, Rosie's diner looked like the heart of America had gathered on its front steps. The entire parking lot shimmered under a sea of candlelight and phone screens. Hand-painted signs waved in the early breeze. "Kindness isn't for sale. Stand with Clara. This diner feeds hope." The smell of pancakes mixed with campfire smoke. Wrestling fans in brotherhood jackets handed out coffee to strangers. Truckers, nurses, teachers, even small-town mayors, all standing together on the cracked asphalt of Route 22. And in the center of it all stood Clara Miller, the waitress who'd once been invisible, now facing a crowd that had come to make her visible forever. "Clara! Clara!" they chanted, clapping in rhythm, voices echoing through the morning fog. She stood on the diner's steps, still wearing her faded pink apron, her hair tied back the same way it had been that stormy night. The same neon sign buzzed faintly behind her, stubborn, imperfect, alive. Beside her stood Jack Rourke, arms crossed, eyes glinting with pride. The Brotherhood wrestlers flanked them like an unbreakable wall. Jack leaned toward her, his voice low and calm. "You ready for this?" Clara shook her head, half laughing, half nervous. "No, but I don't think I was ready for any of it," he smiled. "Good answer." The crowd parted as Alyssa Morgan arrived with a stack of folders in her hands and a grin that said she had news. "Clara," she said, "we did it." Clara blinked. "Did what?" The injunction went through. The court ruled that Hutchins's eviction notice was invalid. He falsified zoning claims. The diner is officially protected under the Small Business Preservation Act. The words hit her like sunlight after a storm. "You mean, it's yours to keep," Alyssa said. "He can't touch it." For a moment, Clara just stood there, stunned. Her knees went weak and she laughed. The kind of laugh that only happens when relief feels like oxygen. The crowd erupted. Cheers, clapping, people crying, hugging strangers they'd never met. Jack put a hand on her shoulder. "You did it." She turned to him, eyes glassy. "We did it." A camera crew moved closer. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones raised high. "Clara, what's next for you? What do you want to say to Derek Hutchins? What will happen to Rosie's Diner now?" She smiled shyly, stepping forward, her voice trembling but strong. "I don't have fancy words," she said into the mic. "I'm just a waitress who opened a door. I didn't do it for fame or money. I did it because 10 men were cold, hungry, and human. And now, because of all of you, this little diner will stay open, for everyone who still believes in kindness." Applause whistles. Someone in the back yelled, "We love you, Clara." She wiped her eyes. "I love you too, all of you." Jack squeezed her hand, then stepped forward. "We're not just celebrating survival," he said, his deep voice rumbling through the crowd. "We're celebrating unity. We saw greed try to win, and it didn't. We saw fear show up at the door, and it was met with compassion." He looked over at the neon sign, still flickering faintly. "This place started as Rosie's Diner, but today it's something new. Today it's ours." He turned back to Clara, smiling. "What do you think about a new name?" Clara tilted her head, thinking, "A new name?" The crowd quieted. Cameras zoomed in. Then she looked at Jack and the wrestlers, her smile widening. "How about Titan's Diner? Built on kindness?" The roar that followed shook the ground. Over the next week, the transformation began. The Brotherhood helped repaint the building, scrubbing decades of grime from its walls. Local artists designed a new mural, Clara handing a cup of coffee to Jack during the storm, both smiling, the words "one small act can change everything" painted above them. When the grand reopening day came, cars lined the highway for miles. People waited hours for a booth. But no one complained. They were part of something bigger now, a story that reminded them the world wasn't all bad inside. Clara moved between tables, apron freshly pressed, laughter filling the air. Jack helped in the back, flipping pancakes like a pro, while the wrestlers signed autographs for kids. The diner was more alive than ever, buzzing, glowing, unstoppable. Later that night, long after the last customer had left, Clara stood by the window, watching the empty lot. The neon sign reflected in her eyes, and she whispered softly, "Thank you, Rosie, for giving me a start. And thank you, world, for reminding me people still care. Jack joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He handed her one. Feels good, doesn't it? She smiled. Better than I ever imagined. He looked out the window, then at her. You know what I think? What? He smirked. The world's got enough cynics. Maybe it's time for more Claras. She laughed, bumping his shoulder. You talk too much for a wrestler. He grinned. And you've got too much heart for a waitress. They clinked their mugs together, the sound small but perfect. Outside, the pink glow of Titan's Diner, built on kindness, illuminated the highway like a beacon against the night. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe for more true stories that remind us the world's still full of good people. And tell me in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? I want to thank you personally, because stories like this only live when people like you keep them alive. She smiled softly at the camera, her reflection caught in the diner's window, the pink neon glowing behind her. And remember, never underestimate the power of opening a door.